So at the beginning of my year at the Royal Academy, I guess I was wondering what it actually meant and if it was possible even to be taught composition. Now, I obviously love music and I could talk about music, but I didn't know anything about it technically, and I was very worried that the act of learning composition would somehow, I guess I was thinking it would somehow turn it into something mathematical.
Dare I say that for me sometimes mathematical games say they're a very big part of it, and I love them. There's a joy in making a symmetry between things where they balance perfectly, or that you make a nicer rhythm which repeats itself and it governs the lengths of the phrases, but then you do something to it which modifies it so that it accelerates rather in the manner of an isorhythmic motet in late Middle Ages.
It became clear to me, I think, very early on that I must be aware of the mathematical underpinning of the way that music can be done and the beauty that there is in some of these arrangements and some of these rules. But instead of them enclosing me and restricting me, they would actually be constantly liberating me because they would be combined with the intellectual and the romantic, if you like, and the poetic thinking.
I think that's very important when you're teaching composition to whoever the student is. You try to get to the essence of what it is that they're trying to find, and not to impose a technique or anything from without, but somehow it's about understanding the properties of the material, isn't it? So that's how you compose. But also the thing about game playing in composition. The fact that composing is play as well. I mean, the sense of pleasure in that. None of those things, as you were saying, Max, is contradictory with the idea of spontaneity and feeling.
In terms of that mummification you were talking about, and the way that classical music to an extent has been somehow manipulated into its dead icons and its masterpieces, there seems to be something about that for me has removed, if you like, the charge, the sting of the emotion that's in the music. It's almost like the mainstream, the sponsors of the music, especially now, if you like, are so anxious about the fact that it has this kind of turbulent meaning and it's intellectual and it's emotional and it's poetic, that they want to tame it almost and turn it into something that has increasingly alienated an audience who elsewhere clearly like and love music.
If you make something bland, anodyne, without contour, you kill it. And let's face it, a lot of the language of composers like Haydn and Mozart, it has become commonplace. Can you imagine what an audience would have thought with that chord at the opening of the last movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony? They would have never heard anything like it, whereas now, oh yes, you hear that every day in every horror film, and it doesn't mean a damn thing.
Even though you're the master of the Queen's music and you're at the proms, there is a sense really that you're in the kind of shadows, I would say. And I wondered if you felt that in a way, that while all this is going on, all this noise that's being made, and people talk about music in a completely different way, there you are as one of the great modern musicians in a weird kind of exile, if you like.
I think I'm very, very fortunate in that I am played enough that I don't have financial worries. My pieces are played, probably more than I deserve, but some pieces have taken on and played over and over again. Well, wonderful for my bank manager, but I must say that I have no envy for those people in the pop world, whatever. I think that life must be pretty hellish some of the time because you don't have any time to think. And I have plenty of time to think.
I sometimes stumble towards some kind of theory in the 20th century that because classical music as a whole, in a sense, didn't do what happened with popular music, which was this extraordinary exploitation of the recording studio, if you like, to transform the sonic possibilities of the music, that somehow even the most extreme experimental classical music didn't really develop.
Mozart wrote 27 piano concertos because they always wanted a new one. They weren't thinking about the canon at all. And yet recording music, suddenly after you've got the examples of Stravinsky, say, in Elgar and later Britain, Vaughan Williams, of course, Max has done all this recording, it actually, I think, quickly centred on the idea of a museum culture around repertoire, that's not been so healthy.
Is there any pop music that you would particularly point out that you've enjoyed?
I haven't listened to a great deal in the last few years, simply because if you listen to it at a lower volume, you're not getting the impact. And if I listen to it at its proper volume, with damaged ears, I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I have learned a great deal from pop musicians, right through from Gershwin to John Lennon to Paul McCartney. And there are one or two good recent tunes, but I do despair when it's all attitude and hype.
Yes.
And not much at the centre of it. And I'm not going to mention any names.
I think we could all have our own examples. Chris, of course, you're a big fan of Swing Out Sister.
You bastard.
And I like the way the string quartets are described as a kind of novel almost in 10 parts. You know, that idea, is that the key concern in a way? It is simply expressing who you are and where you think you are in time, and this is the way you can do it, and you want to do it the best you can.
I think it's to do with bearing witness. Bearing witness to my experience, my interpretation, if you like, of what I've gone through, experienced in every way, every level, and a reaction to political, to environmental, to every which thing in life. And somehow, if you're a composer, that all goes in and is transformed into real live music.
We said early on with you, I think in the first introductory session in a room near here, when the whole issue of the fact that you couldn't read music came up, and it was suggested somewhere that in fact that didn't really matter, and that, you know, what was important was what's all this kind of thing. Whereas I said straight off, if you're serious about it, we're going to deal with this, because it would be as absurd as an actor taking on the part of Hamlet and not being able to read the script, for example, and could only learn it by hearing an audio track.
I fell in love with the score within weeks, didn't I, as this kind of quasi-literary object that was transmitting all this incredible thinking through time and therefore become the most modern thing imaginable, like the internet in a way, you know.
Yes,
Scores are wonderful things.
A musical score is such a mine of information, and one of the, dare I say, one of the most perfect and complex creations of the human mind. It is multidimensional. It records events in time in a way which no other civilization has ever imagined or dreamed.
It enhances the experience in such an extraordinary way that I don't see it as that it got me realising it was maths or figures or numbers, but actually sees that it's more magical and more mystical, because it can use the maths but still be about the imagination.
A score is not a flat object.
Yes.
In time and in our ears and in sound, it's as three-dimensional as a sculpture, and you have to go in it. And of course you talk about the spaces between the notes, and you're very aware of that. If they weren't there, that score would not breathe. And a great deal of composition is knowing when to not write notes, to leave enough space between them so that the notes tell and they do come to life, they breathe. When you're writing a piece and it's a full orchestral score or a string quartet or even a piano sonata, whatever it is, that's there in 3 dimensions, at least. And you're inside it and working it and listening to it. It's the most exciting thing in the world to do. It's only when you take away all commercial considerations, particularly now, that music will bear witness and not false witness.